The Tupolev PAK is Russia's answer to America's legendary B-2 Spirit bomber, or at least that's what Moscow hopes it's gonna be. Promised as the pinnacle of Russian stealth aviation, the PAK represents Russia's ambition to reassert itself as a global military powerhouse with an aircraft engineered to strike unseen and undetected. However, there's a bit of a catch. Despite decades of planning, billions in funding, and countless grand announcements, the PAK has yet to complete a single mission. So why has Russia struggled to get this revolutionary bomber off the ground? Well, the answers lie in an intricate web of economic troubles, corruption, and geopolitical isolation, all compounded by the relentless pressure of ongoing conflicts. Will the PAK ever truly challenge the stealth supremacy of the West, or is it destined to become just another ambitious Russian military project that never takes flight? Let's find out.
Today, I want to show you something that perfectly captures the engineering marvels that we cover on this channel. This is the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization. Hopefully a book you'll never need, but definitely a book that you will want once I show you how awesome it is. You open it to any page, random page, not picking anything in particular, and you think, oh, I'm just going to get a boring page of text. No. Every page has an awesome drawing. I don't even know what this is. This is the steam engine. It's got these beautiful kind of like medieval art style drawings. It's got all this history. It's got all that, how it works. It's super easily explained. My kids are way too young for this, but I look at it with them anyway, because I'm like interested in the text and they'll look at the fancy pictures. And it's a lot better than reading whatever we normally read them, because children's books are terribly boring for adults. Every single one of these 400 plus pages features hand-drawn engineering illustrations that look like they came straight out of a master engineer's workshop. 180 of humanity's greatest inventions. Waste management. I mean, look at this. Look at the detail on this. It's crazy. This is waste management. It's wild. Across 23 chapters, it's got the tank. You go to everyday life, toothbrushing. Whoa, toothbrushes in the past look weird. What's most extraordinary about this book, it doesn't just show you what was built, it shows you how. The level of detail is amazing, I just showed you that. And look, this isn't just another coffee table book. This project raised $3.2 million on Kickstarter. It involved more than 50 professionals and became a bestseller in 2023. It's perfect for anyone fascinated by our modern world, and I've got an exclusive discount for you. Use the code MEGAPROJECTS at checkout and you'll get a nice little discount right there. There's a link below. And back to today's video.
The Tupolev PAK, or simply PAK, as we'll refer to it from here on out, can trace its roots back to the late 1990s. At that time, the government of a newly independent Russia began reconsidering its strategic bomber fleet, which was then composed of airframes inherited from the Soviet Union, such as the Tu-95MS and the Tu-160. They were perfectly serviceable, they were usable airframes, make no mistake. The 95 was a slow and steady heavy bomber, still capable of delivering big ordnance, while the 160 was a supersonic stalwart that could happily break Mach 2 when going full throttle. But Russia, they didn't want serviceable, they didn't want usable, they wanted the best. Aircraft that would prove it hadn't gone soft since it dropped the hammer and the sickle and was still capable of keeping up with the military big boys of the world. Then, as now in fairness, that meant one thing in the world of strategic bombers: stealth capabilities. These were, of course, spearheaded by the American B-2 Spirit, which was introduced to service in 1997 after a long development period. With the goal of obtaining something equivalent for themselves, Russia began nascent developments. Preliminary work to determine realistic requirements took a solid decade, concluding in December 2007. From there, 3 more hurdles had to be jumped: funding it, designing it, building it. The cash came soon enough. The Russian Ministry of Defense had its accounting done by mid-2008, and the other 2 matters were resolved by September of the following year, when Tupolev Design Bureau was formally awarded the contract. From there, a great debate erupted in the halls of the Kremlin. As is often the case with governments, there was some meddling in the design process. Some high-ranking officials pushed for a fast design, a stealthy Tu-160 variant, while others preferred a Russian B-2, a subsonic, nuclear-capable strategic bomber that wouldn't need to prioritize rapid takeoff and landing because, essentially, nothing capable of harming it could see it. Caught in the middle with the engineers and the draftsmen at Tupolev, who simply wanted the freedom to work with the specified requirements. Come 2013, however, egos had been placated and accords reached. Lieutenant General Viktor Bondarev, then commander of the Russian Air Force, confirmed that they were indeed moving forward with the Russian B-2 option. From there, with them finally able to just get on with their job, Tupolev moved like muck off a shovel. The preliminary design was completed in 2014 and approved by the Ministry of Defense that same year. Despite all the faffing, things actually looked reasonably optimistic. Large investments were made in production infrastructure in 2015, with the K's and Aircraft Production Association receiving a not at all insignificant 5 billion rubles, or $83 million, to modernize its facilities so that it could produce the finished aircraft. Many were quick to write off the PAK as yet another harebrained Russian aerospace ambition that would inevitably falter and come to absolutely nothing. But with Moscow actually putting its money where its mouth was, well, maybe the then-touted prototype completion date of 2018 wasn't that ridiculous after all. Except, well, it turns out in the end it was all just a bit ridiculous. No sooner had the Kremlin wired the cash over to Kazan than it changed its mind, deciding in effect to abandon all that big, posh keeping up with the West malarkey. Moscow is now banking on its dependable, tried and tested hype, restarting production of the Tu-160M in late 2015 rather than prioritizing the PAK-DA. Naturally, this decision siphoned off resources from the trailblazing project, yet the few designers left and the scant funds that they had between them persevered. By 2017, they'd completed a full-size mock-up that enabled them to test both radar signatures and its aerodynamic qualities. Now from there, progress was slow but steady. TASS, a Russian state news agency, reported in May 2020 that multiple airframes were in production and also claimed that the first engine prototype had completed its initial testing. Russian media insisted that flight trials were just around the corner. Now, to be fair, given the pictures and evidence presented, we've got little reason to doubt TASS's claims. And this no doubt leaves you wondering, since it's been 5 years since those reports, well, why haven't we seen any PAK-DA, not even a prototype, take to the sky? Well, we'll get to that later, dear viewer, but before addressing that matter, we should take the time to dive into the technical nitty-gritty of the PAK-DA to ensure we are well informed about the actual aircraft under discussion. As both the thumbnail and our repeated allusions to the PAK-DA being a Russian B-2 have already hinted, it's said to be a so-called flying wing design. A flying wing, in case you happen to be wondering, you're probably not because of the thumbnail, is an aircraft configuration where the fuselage and the tail are eliminated, leaving only a single broad, aerodynamically efficient wing. This design is ideal for stealth because it lacks the traditional fuselage and tail, drastically reducing the radar cross-section by eliminating sharp angles and protruding surfaces that reflect radar waves. Or, to simplify it quite a bit, the less pointy an aircraft is, the fewer pokey outbits there are, the less there is for radar waves to bounce off of, making it harder to detect. Isn't stealth easy? As a bonus, the streamlined shape also reduces drag. With less aircraft surface facing the oncoming air, drag is minimized and the craft cuts through the atmosphere, thereby increasing fuel efficiency and allowing for longer range missions. There is, however, far more to stealth than just a really clever shape. To really minimize that radar signature, the PAK-DA is also set to include radar-absorbing materials along with engine inlets and exhausts that are buried deep within the fuselage. These inlets are carefully designed to shield the engine's fan blades, one of the most radar-reflective components, from detection. They often employ complex S-shaped ducts that prevent radar waves from directly reaching and bouncing off internal parts. Meanwhile, the exhaust nozzles are recessed to trim the overall radar signature. In addition, radar-absorbent materials are applied across the airframe to soak up and scatter incoming radar waves, rather than reflecting them back to their source, thereby further reducing the bomber's detectability. As for power, it's currently believed that the PAK-DA will rely on 2 tried and tested Kuznetsov Mk32 engines. This venerable Soviet-period motor, though never counted among the big Soviet engines, did establish a successful niche as the go-to power plant for the Tu-160. The one purportedly designed for the PAK-DA, however, is to be quite a bit different from your usual Mk32, since, after all, it is not destined for supersonic flight. It is so different, in fact, that its development has cost the Russian taxpayer around 8 billion rubles or $90 million at the current post-invasion of Ukraine sanction rates. Sadly, we don't have many specifics about this Mk32 Tier 2, as they have taken to calling it for obvious state security reasons. What we do know is that it will be non-afterburning, since the PAK-DA is to be a subsonic craft and thus has no need to really push the power. Additionally, it will apparently have the capability to operate non-stop for 30 hours, be resistant to environmental temperatures ranging from -60 to +50 Celsius, possess a service life of 12 to 21 years, and be hardened to resist the EMP effects of nuclear explosions. And the PAK is shaping up to be about the weight that you would expect from such an aircraft, with a maximum takeoff weight in the region of 145 to 160 metric tons. For context, that is around 80% of the weight of a B-2, around 30 tons less than a Tu-95, and roughly the same as the B-2. When it comes to range, the aircraft is said to aim for a 12,000-kilometer range on one tank of go-juice, or with aerial refueling, an effectively unlimited range. To give you a practical idea, if departing from Moscow, this 12,000-kilometer range would allow it to reach Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, with a few hundred kilometers of fuel remaining, though not quite enough to reach Darwin at the northern tip of Australia. Internally, the PAK is designed to house an advanced avionics suite that incorporates artificial intelligence, assisted flight, and targeting systems to ease the pilot's workload. The cockpit will accommodate a 4-person crew, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and weapons officer, each equipped with cutting-edge digital displays and control interfaces. The aircraft's active, electronically scanned array radar is purported to provide superior detection and tracking capabilities, allowing for precise targeting and threat assessment. Integrated electronic warfare measures are also expected to enhance its survivability, enabling it to jam enemy radar, disrupt missile guidance, and execute cyber warfare operations in contested airspace. Then there are its data-sharing capabilities, which is not the most exciting-sounding feature in modern warfare, but it is a really big deal. To simplify, imagine this. Suitably equipped Russian infantry, and anyone or anything else on the ground really, would be able to talk to the PAK. This will allow the aircraft to receive, quite literally, laser-precise targeting information, enabling it to drop deadly accurate munitions from way out of visual range, along with all sorts of other handy information. Now, that is, of course, a simplification, but you get the idea. Having all of your war-making bits talking to each other is a big, really clever idea in modern combat. And that segues rather nicely into the PAK-DAR's prospective weapons, which are meant to be formidable, to put it mildly. Among its arsenal will be the KH-BD, a next-generation long-range stealth cruise missile boasting a range of over 6,000 kilometers. Complementing this is the nuclear-capable KH-102 cruise missile, which has a range of 5,500 kilometers and a yield of around 250 kilotons. This equates to about 12 times the yield of the Fat Man bomb dropped on Hiroshima back in 1945. While that yield isn't huge for a modern nuclear weapon by any stretch, it is certainly a significant amount for a warhead bolted to the front of a cruise missile. Hypersonic weaponry, famously one of the things the modern Russian military really does get right, is expected to feature prominently, with the KH-95 being the weapon touted. Now, annoyingly, we don't know too much about this weapon, again due to that understandable state security thing. Typically, however, its speed is claimed to range from Mach 5 to Mach 10. And its range is estimated to be up to 7,000 kilometers. It's also designed to be nuclear capable, with a warhead in the 500 kiloton kind of range generally suggested as its top limit. Further, in a term that is as peculiar as it is interesting, the PAK is sometimes rumored to be aiming for a limited air-to-air missile capability. Now, don't get us wrong, this doesn't sound like it's intended to make it a do-everything aircraft that can ignore your radar, nuke your capital, then blow up your F-35 fleet. Rather, it is typically discussed as a last line of defense against interceptors, something that is hopefully never needed, but you never know, could just about prove handy to have nonetheless. And finally, to close our discussion of the PAK-DAR's potential weaponry, it is both widely discussed and reasonably assumed that whatever weapons it ends up carrying will reside in an internal weapons bay. This is because external hardpoint-mounted weapons would significantly degrade the aircraft's stealth characteristics. You see, stealth technology relies heavily on reducing radar cross-sections by maintaining smooth, non-reflective surfaces while minimizing protrusions that could create radar hotspots. Hardpoint-mounted weapons disrupt this by introducing sharp edges and reflective surfaces, which amplify radar returns and make the aircraft more detectable. Additionally, external ordnance interferes with the aircraft's low observable shaping, negating some of the benefits of radar-absorbent materials and increases its infrared signature due to aerodynamic drag and heat buildup. Now look, like most of this section, that claim comes from analysts making educated and informed guesses, as well as Russian military sources issuing bold declarations about either what it absolutely will have, trust me bro, or outright saying that it's what they would like it to have. Such an approach brings us no joy, but alas, it is par for the course when discussing cutting-edge military kit, not just for Russian systems, but across the board. For instance, you try nailing down the B-2's top speed to an objective and irrefutable primary source, and you will quickly realize that we really don't know much about these top-of-the-line jets. And that is about all we know about how the PAK-DA is probably going to look, so let us move on, shall we? And here we return to the question posed at the end of the first section. If the PAK-DA is meant to turn out as quite the tiny bit of kit, why haven't we even seen a prototype take to the sky? And the answer is a big one, so we're going to devote this entire section to it. The first challenge is simply building the aircraft. Remember when we said that Moscow had allocated 5 billion rubles or $83 million to get a factory up to snuff for making the PAK-DA? Well, it turns out this amount isn't nearly as much as it sounds, considering that state-of-the-art aircraft manufacturing facilities are, well, really f***ing expensive. To explain further, consider this. For a project like this in the West, the budget solely for building the assembly and outfitting, as well as the tooling needed to go inside of it, would easily run into the billions of dollars. Exact figures to prove that point are, of course, hard to come by, but consider the evidence we do have. The YF-23, Northrop's failed attempt at winning the Advanced Tactical Fighter program that eventually gave us the F-22, ended up costing them over $1 million a day in facilities costs in 1990s money. And it certainly hasn't got cheaper since then, has it? Russia also finds itself in a bit of a peculiar economic position. Its GDP per capita and other economic indicators should place it firmly within the developing nation category, a status in which you would not expect advanced aerospace and defense projects to occur at all, and certainly not with the frequency that they do. And yet, they do. It's all thanks to Russia's Soviet inheritance, which, for all of that nation's economic flaws, did leave it with a very advanced technical sector. All three of its presidents, Yeltsin, Putin, and Medvedev, have been acutely aware that this legacy was a hell of a boon for the nation, and they have fiercely fought to keep it surviving in the face of intense overseas competition, even if that's just in the form of a few pity contracts here and there to keep the factory lights on and the engineering graduates busy. And because that advanced industry isn't backed by a state that can afford to really throw the cash around, Russia seems to find itself trapped in a constant loop. It has the know-how to produce prototypes and even a few limited examples of some legitimately incredible military kit, but it can just never quite manage to roll it out properly. As an example, consider the Su-57 stealth fighter. According to all but the most pessimistic commentators, it's a perfectly competent machine, even if it doesn't quite match up to its American counterparts. Yet, despite its first prototype having flown back in 2010 and its full production line being open since 2019, no more than 40 have been built at the time of writing, and that includes 10 prototypes. Now, this phenomenon isn't limited to major systems either, as the AN-94 can attest. Meant to be a new service rifle for a new Russia, the AN-94 was an excellent tool that, through the use of a delayed recoil system, could fire 2 rounds down the barrel before the recoil from the first one affected the shooter. However, largely due to its cost, production was halted after roughly 2,500 units had left the factory. As a result, the Russian military has reverted to using the venerable AK-74M alongside limited quantities of the AK-12, a refined iteration of the tried-and-true AK family. You can see this problem in the numbers too. In 2023, Russia's military budget was estimated to be around $109 billion, which sounds like a lot until you consider that China and the US, both countries that happily utilize advanced military kit without a second thought, had budgets of $296 billion and $916 billion respectively in that very same year. Sure, this figure does put Russia as the third biggest military spender on Earth, but it is not enough to change reality. Russia has ambitions and brains beyond what its bank account can facilitate. And so this constant cycle of prototyping top-of-the-line kit that goes basically nowhere continues, a cycle that, it appears, the PAK-DA is just the latest victim of. And then there's the issue of corruption and inefficiency within the Russian defense sector, which only makes Russia's financial woes worse by effectively shrinking the size of the pot. To illustrate our point, consider the case of the Zabralo ballistic vest supplied to the Russian armed forces between 1999 and 2005. Approximately 14,000 vests, including models 6B11-3, 6B17, 6B18, and 6B24, were purchased for a cost of 203 million rubles, or roughly $2.5 million. Investigations later revealed that these vests were substandard. Manufacturers had cut corners by using fewer protective layers than specified, a decision that compromised soldier safety as cash was saved and kept by those responsible. This fraudulent scheme ultimately led to the conviction of General Valery Znarherko and Tatiana Romanova, both of whom were sentenced to 4 years in prison for their roles in the corruption. In a separate instance, the overhaul of the Russian cruiser Peter the Great was similarly tainted by corruption. Military prosecutors uncovered that the refurbishment funds were embezzled through fake contracts, diverting money straight into private pockets. Additionally, the widespread nature of corruption is underscored by Russia's ranking of 136 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index. We don't yet know how or even if the PAK has been embroiled in any direct corruption, and we would only ever know if Putin A. finds out about it and B. decides that the corruption is severe enough to be worth punishing. Yet, when it is so prolific in the Russian defense sector, there's no doubting that it is a very real potential contributing factor to consider when musing over why we've yet to see any PAK get into the sky. Then there's the matter of Ukraine. Since Russia's invasion began, the conflict has completely shifted Moscow's military priorities. No longer can it afford to invest in futuristic cutting-edge systems. Instead, it is now focused on rapidly replenishing battlefield losses with simpler, tried-and-tested military hardware. Consequently, advanced and complex systems like stealth bombers have been pushed down the priority list. For example, rather than mass-producing the groundbreaking yet complicated T-14 Armata tank, Moscow is sticking with the T-80 BVM, a modernized but distinctly Soviet-era bit of equipment. Similarly, instead of concentrating on mass-producing its stealthy Su-57 fighters, Russia is producing more Su-25SM ground attack aircraft, a design whose origins firmly date back to the Cold War. Drones, artillery shells, and basic armored vehicles have become the Kremlin's top priorities, while stealth bombers remain at the bottom of the list, with their operational debut at least a decade away, if it ever arrives at all. And if that wasn't problematic enough, sanctions and geopolitical isolation have only exacerbated these issues. Aggressive Western sanctions have left Russia increasingly starved of the essential high-tech components required to build advanced systems like the PAK-DA, items such as sophisticated avionics, advanced semiconductors, and composite materials vital for stealth technology. Moreover, sourcing or independently developing cutting-edge tech like radar-absorbing coatings or next-gen electronic warfare systems at a level comparable to Western manufacturers has now become almost insurmountable. We've already seen this issue hamper Su-57 production, and it's difficult to imagine the PAK-DA faring any better. So, when you consider all those daunting factors, corruption, wartime pressures, budget constraints, and international sanctions, the prospect of seeing anything beyond a prototype of the PAK-DA becomes exceedingly slim, and even that would be optimistic. Russia has a rich history of ambitious projects that fizzle out before they ever truly take flight. The PAK-DA seems destined to join their ranks. It's grand in conception, yet doomed to indefinite delays, endless scaling back, or just quiet abandonment. For all the bluster and bold claims, it appears that the PAK-DA will remain an intriguing what-if, rather than ever soaring through Russian skies as an operational frontline bomber. Thank you for watching.